Are you new to teaching elementary music, or do you feel like you're just spinning your wheels every day in your classroom? Maybe you're overwhelmed and honestly just don't know where to go for advice and mentorship. Hi, I'm Jessica, and when I'm not drinking all the coffee, watching Razorback sports, or hanging out with my family of boys, it's my passion to help elementary music teachers just like you teach your students by using your unique personality and teaching style. In this podcast, you'll find helpful tips, strategies, and ideas that will help you kick that stress to the curb and begin teaching music with confidence. Let's get started. So when COVID-19 hit, then most of you listening to this were asked to teach music virtually in one way or another. It looks different for every single teacher. And as you go back into the fall, or if you're listening to this and you're already in your school year and you're teaching virtually, it's just something that is a learning curve. Just like anything new in life, when you became a brand new music teacher right out of college, or when you've switched to a new school, or whatever it might look like, teaching virtually is the same. You can do it. It just takes time, practice, effort, and just getting in there and a lot of trial and error. With that said, though, Michelle Rose, who's on the podcast today, has been a virtual teacher even before all of the music teachers everywhere else were asked to teach virtually as well. She teaches music at a virtual school, and I asked her to come on the podcast today to talk about virtual teaching, what it looks like, how she plans, different teaching strategies that you can implement as well. She has been so active in the music education community with helping music teachers. I've seen her hosting so many free workshops and answering questions left and right, and you are going to get so much from this episode. And in fact, at the end of the episode, she gives you ways to reach out to her as well to continue asking questions. She's also going to talk about self-care, which is something that's super important to her as well. And I love the way she talks about self-care. It's actually in a different way I've heard a lot of other people present it. So a little bit about Michelle. She teaches middle and high school music at North Carolina Virtual Academy. She also directs the after-school virtual band and choir. Michelle holds a bachelor's degree in music education and performance from Elon University and is currently pursuing a master's in music education from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. She's a teacher, author, and blogger at themusicalrose.com, and she has been a presenter at several conferences and has been a guest speaker for pre-service music teachers at colleges across the country. In her free time, she enjoys baking, sewing, and going on walks with her dog Toby, short for Beethoven. You can connect with her on Instagram at _musical_rose or through her website, themusicalrose.com. So like I said, I know there's so many questions around self-care during virtual teaching in COVID and all the things going on right now, but also with strategies for teaching virtually. So like I said, whether you're listening to this and you're just getting back into your school year or you're already in the middle of it, but you still need some strategies and ideas, this episode is going to help spur you forward. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, everybody, we are back with a brand new episode today. I am so excited to have Michelle Rose on with me today. We are going to talk all things virtual teaching and also self-care, two things that she talks a lot about, and I just cannot wait to dive in with this conversation. So before we do, Michelle, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey to becoming a music teacher, and anything else you want our listeners to know today.
All right, awesome. Happy to be here. My name is Michelle Rose, as you said, and I am a middle and high school virtual music teacher, and I was a virtual music teacher before all the school closures happened. I teach at a full-time virtual school. We serve students in grades K through 12, and I specifically teach 8th grade music concepts, which is just basically a general music class, high school music appreciation, and then I also direct the extracurricular virtual choir and virtual band and orchestra. And so I didn't start out in virtual music teaching prior to virtual teaching. I also taught high school band and I also taught K2 music. But virtual teaching has become my jam. And I just wrapped up my 3rd year with my virtual school this June.
That's so awesome. So you and I were talking about before we started recording that you've just been like kind of the go-to expert, let's be honest, for during virtual teaching land of COVID. And it's just been kind of crazy. And so all these teachers that were in the regular classroom and then they were told, hey, you're going to just be teaching your kiddos online now, you were the go-to person. And how amazing, first of all, is that without you even knowing, like you just kind of have been in there doing it. So you were able to talk to all these teachers. But like I said, you've quickly become the expert. And so first of all, has it been kind of exhausting, rewarding, or all of the above for showing up and helping teachers as you have been?
Yes, so definitely a combination of both for sure. I don't think I could have ever imagined everybody being in my shoes. Like if you told me a year ago that suddenly everyone also would be teaching music virtually, I would not believe you for 1 second. But here we are. And so it's been a really incredible journey because virtual music at the K-12 level is not very common. Even in many virtual schools, they often don't have a music teacher. So my school, I'm very lucky that my administration values the arts. And so it was important to have a music teacher, but I still struggle to find people to collaborate with because the emphasis on virtual music education has really been at the collegiate level or through like private lessons. So there really hasn't been a ton of research or, anything at the K-12 level. And so I was, for the past 2 years, I had really been forging my own path, figuring out how to do ensembles online and figuring out how to be an effective virtual music teacher without much of a guide really. And then it was so strange overnight to have to help other people do that too. And so I love helping teachers. I'm also a mentor at my school and I've always loved presenting and helping other teachers out. I just never thought I would be in the position where I would have to help so many people out at one time. So I remember, the first week that school started closing, I started throwing up videos just to help people get started. I think the first one I did was a Facebook Live on Zoom, and I'd never done a Facebook Live before. Like Instagram is really my jam, but it got like thousands of views, and that's not really what I'm used to, And I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. This is not just like happening. And so then I was trying to do, I really front loaded a lot of the basics as much as possible. And just to try to help people, survive, not even really thrive, but just give people the basics to survive because it is so different. And so, I feel really excited because I love virtual teaching. So I feel excited that I can share with people. But I definitely also felt very overwhelmed. I'm a pretty introverted person. Like I love presenting and getting up and teaching, but in terms of like recovery time, I do require a lot. When I'm putting myself out there and giving so much energy to other people. So I kept telling my favorite human, Wesley, that this is about as famous as I ever want to be in my whole life. So I love helping people, but, I went from getting a handful of DMs, a week to like 10, 20, 30, sometimes DMs a day in the height of it. And I was getting lots of emails and Facebook messages. And so it was definitely a lot to deal with at first. And in this whole process too, we were moving into a new house because our house move-in date got delayed from early February to the first week of April, which is where the peak was hitting in a lot of places. So it was just such a wild time. And it was both exhilarating and exhausting. But I'm just very happy to be in a position where I can help so many people because I remember my first year of virtual teaching and how difficult it was.
Yeah, it's always that experience that you have that you are able to share with others that kind of makes it exciting. I've heard a mentor of mine tell me before, you don't have to be so far ahead of other people, just like one step in front of them. And that really helped me with mentoring teachers too, because you feel like you're like, well, I don't know everything, but I know my experience. And so you knowing that is tremendously helpful and valuable. But I can completely relate to what you said about being an introvert. It's funny because I feel like I've talked about this before, but people think just because you're online and they're like, oh, I found her on Instagram, or, oh, she has a podcast, or they just automatically think, oh, you must be extroverted because you're doing all the things. And I'm like, no, let's rewind that a little bit. Because like you said, when I show up and serve, talk, at the end of the day, I told you this too. You're just kind of sitting in bed going, my brain is just like mush, because you're just like,
Yes,
you've done so much. I don't know. And so as an introvert, you're not, you love talking and teaching, like you said, and connecting with people, but you just have a different way of unwinding than an extrovert does. I think about my sister. She's always been go, 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 go. Let's go out. Let's go, go, go. And I'm like, I kind of want to just stay in and watch a movie. She's like, what's wrong with you? It's just totally different personalities. And so, yeah, introverts, I feel like just because you do talk and you teach and you're, out there on internet land, it doesn't mean like you want to be on there all the time.
right. Yeah. And I think it really comes down to like how my batteries are recharged, and my batteries are recharged with a lot of like solitude, alone time.
Mm-hmm.
And, some people's batteries get recharged by like being around people all the time and interacting with people. And so it's just kind of looking at that and understanding that about myself, so that I am caring for myself in that way and making sure that I am getting enough time to recharge so I can continue to serve people effectively.
Yes, I love that. So before we get into virtual teaching, I want to talk to you about self-care, because you just say things in a way that just kind of like, oh, that makes sense. It's like, I kind of didn't think about it that way. When I see you posting something on Instagram or something, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And so when teachers show up and serve others, especially as they've been navigating through COVID-19, virtual teaching, but just teaching in general, you're going to start feeling the burnout if you're not taking care of yourself. And I think a lot of times teachers hear this and they're like, I'm so sick of people talking about self-care. How in the world do I do it? How do I truly take care of myself? The hours in the day are limited. So what are your favorite ways of telling teachers to practice self-care? Any advice around that?
Sure. So I did burn out and take a year off of teaching, actually before the job I have now. So it's very important to me. When I came back to teaching, I knew I had to do it differently. And I've really tried to push myself to do a better job of taking care of myself, because I don't think there was ever any time in any of my, college classes or whatever, where someone was like, you need to take care of yourself. You can't work all the time. Like, that is just not a
Mm-hmm.
sentiment that I hear in music communities. It's like, push yourself. If you're not pushing yourself, someone else is, and someone's going to get that job you want, or the performance opportunity you want, or whatever. And really, what I have found is that when I take care of myself and I do less for work, I can show up more for my students.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest thing is, with this trendy kind of self-care thing that's happening, is that a lot of times these actions that are pushed on people, like take a bubble bath or like go get your favorite coffee or whatever, are not actual self-care. They're self-soothing. So these are
Mm-hmm.
kind of short-term, almost band-aids that help you feel better temporarily, but aren't really going to help you necessarily in the long run. So maybe I see a lot of people doing all these kind of self-soothing activities, and self-soothing is totally valid. You need to do some of that too. But if all you're doing is self-soothing and not doing actual self-care are the things that you may or may not want to do, like getting sleep, eating nourishing food, taking a walk, or exercising in some way, um, balancing your finances, all of those things that may be, not necessarily the most fun thing, but the thing that is really going to sustain you in the long run, um, is what I suggest people do. So the biggest thing for me during COVID-19 has been resting. when needed and taking more frequent breaks. And we talked a little bit about this earlier before we started the podcast, but basically there's something happening right now where we wake up in the morning and sometimes things change hour to hour or day to day or week to week. And we don't really know what next week will look like or what next month will look like or what even next year will look like. And so this sudden underlying uncertainty has really shown up for people every day in kind of this lower level anxiety, this lower level fight or flight mode, always being engaged. And so that is draining on your brain. And I think it's important to acknowledge that you can't do as much as you used to right now because of that. It's so much more draining to have to do what you usually do. And first, acknowledge that it's okay. And second, listen to your body, take breaks, rest. I've been taking a lot of naps. Stop what you're doing, allow yourself to just sit on the couch guilt-free. Don't feel bad about doing nothing because your body needs a lot more time to recover right now, and your brain does too. And so I even sometimes will schedule things like downtime in or schedule something at the end of my workday. So it forces me to stop working, like, schedule a virtual yoga class at the end of my workday, or schedule like a FaceTime call where I know my friend is going to call me over and over again if I don't pick up the first time. But giving myself those boundaries kind of built into my day, so that way I don't end up just like trying to push through. And so that way I'm taking care of myself, resting that way. And there's definitely so much more that you can do. It's like extra important for you to take care of yourself when you work from home, because it's not as easy when you work where you live. But just focusing on resting and taking breaks can be a big game changer for sure.
I love that. And it's so true. I am so bad about that, Michelle. Like, I really am. And it's funny because I talk to my audience about self-care all the time, but it's like, I know for myself, if I am sitting on the couch, it's not like I feel like I'm being lazy, but my brain's always going, oh, you could do this right now. Oh, you could work on this. Oh, did you remember to do this? And like, sometimes I have to literally tell myself, you know what, just sit down, take an hour, don't even bring your phone in here and just sit there or watch a movie with my boys or whatever it might be. But it's just funny because like, I feel like that is the hard thing about working from home is you can't always do one more thing. But if you do that, I notice with myself, that's when I get to the end of the day if I have not taken breaks and I'm feeling so overwhelmed. Like today, I have done really good about taking breaks, sitting, relaxing, playing with my kids, but I've also been working on a book I'm writing. And then I knew I had 2 podcast episodes scheduled today. So I'm really good about, and not every day looks like this. There's some days that are like completely full and some days where they're not so much full. And so the not so much full days, I'm really intentional about taking breaks. I took my boys to a creek yesterday and there ended up being snakes in it. So we got out. But anyways,
no.
That was a whole nother story for another day. But yeah, just making, like you said, I love that you said that because it's so true. On a calendar, I'm really good about that too. You don't have anything right now. I don't put that in there. You don't have anything right now. But I look at when I don't have anything and I say, take a break or watch a movie or like you said, take a nap or go on a walk or whatever, because I know myself. And if I don't do that, it sounds so silly telling people to put that on a calendar. But if you're anything like me, who's just keeping it real, if I don't, like you said, if I don't put it on there, I will literally be like, oh, well, I can do this, and this. And then I get to the end of the day and I just feel like I'm like, it's so
right.
bad.
It's something that you have to unlearn, honestly, because like my first year of teaching, I like had my teaching job, but then I also worked a part-time job and I also taught lessons at 2 different music studios because I didn't know what to do with my free time. Like I was just like, well, I guess I'll just fill it with more work.
Yes.
Which is not what I needed. It's not what I need, but I didn't know anything else. Like you go so hard as a music education major, like your every moment of your time has to be filled. But once you get out of college, it's kind of like, I didn't learn how to take care of myself. So I guess I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to fill all of my time with work. And so it definitely gets easier the more you practice resting and intentionally not doing things, the easier it gets. And the thing too to let go of is the guilt around it, because it's easy to just be like, all right, well, here I am. I've got my break on the calendar and here I am. And I feel bad about it because I know I could be doing something else. Yes, you could always be doing something else, of course. But you know, it's okay. Rest is just as valuable as being productive. And
Mm-hmm.
the moments where you're working can't be as, you know, valuable if you don't have a fully rested brain, truly. And it's just, it is definitely difficult to get there, but with practice, just like everything else,
Mm-hmm.
you can also practice resting and without guilt, and working and spending time not working intentionally, because that is really what will sustain you in the long run. And this is also, just want to put this out there to say, this is not to say there won't be seasons of sacrifice where you maybe can't take breaks or you can't rest as much, because, you know, sometimes when I get in those seasons, like when COVID-19 first started happening, all the school closures, I just felt like I couldn't take breaks, like I had to help a lot of people. And so that was like a temporary season of sacrifice for about 2 or 3 weeks. But the thing is, I labeled it as that, and I said to myself, this is going to be temporary. This is not how I'm going to work through the rest of the semester. And I am okay with having, you know, less time to rest or take care of myself, or less breaks. I think just, you know, when people set boundaries, sometimes they can feel extremely restrictive. And then you also feel bad when maybe you don't adhere to those boundaries. So I think making planned exceptions, making temporary time boundaries where things will be different can also be helpful. It was helpful for me to kind of frame it that way, and to understand that I'm not going to get back into the habit of working all the time. Like, this is a temporary season of sacrifice, but in a couple of weeks, it's not going to be anymore.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. That's something I've talked to teachers about, is like you said, you know, I've been telling teachers so much, like when they're in the regular classrooms, to like look at the days they don't need to stay after school and try to leave on time, or try to come in early on certain days and things like that. Well, like you said, when it came to virtual teaching and they were all thrown in there, it was kind of like, I don't have time to do that. But I love that. So those of you listening, that's good advice you can take as you go back to the fall. If you are still, you know, kind of in confusion of figuring things out, that you may have a season, especially towards the beginning of the school year, where things are busier, but then know that after you fall into a routine, it'll settle down and you're able to take more breaks. The other thing I have thought of, I'm sure you've been asked this so many times, is teachers, when they went from their regular schedule of knowing who came when all day long, they knew when their plan time was. If they have a plan time, they knew when their lunch was and all the things. Then a lot of them were either told to send home paper packets, or teach, you know, virtually, or set up a Google Classroom, or whatever else. You know, there were so many different situations. I know for teachers I've talked to, that was really hard, because they'd be like, what do I do with this 4 hours of nothing? I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs. And I said, just enjoy it, because you'll never get this time back. Have you heard that a lot from teachers too? Like, well, my schedule disappeared, so what do I do with this new non-schedule? Like, what do I do with myself?
Yes. Yeah. I think like the biggest thing I've heard is just like structuring your day when you don't have like the physical boundaries. Like, okay, in the morning when I was going, like when I taught at brick and mortar school, like in the morning I would, you know, get dressed and get in my car and unlock my classroom door and do my little morning ritual. Well, suddenly you don't have that. You know, you don't have a commute. You don't even necessarily need to put on different clothes. So you need to create those routines in a different way. And so for me, I do the same thing every morning on weekdays, where I get up and I take my dog out, and I watch the Today Show and I eat my breakfast, and I then put on different clothes. Usually I try to put on jeans at least, just to get my brain into a spot where it knows, okay, this is a work day. Like, these are the things that I do on a work day. And then I only use my school laptop for work unless it just absolutely can't be helped. But another way signaling to my brain, okay, this technology is only used for work. And then when I get into my day, I don't have carpool duty, or I don't have a committee meeting, with a group of teachers, or I don't have all these things where it kind of keeps me on track because I have to show up to places or people will wonder where I am. So I think it's just really helpful to, make a list. I make tons and tons of lists. And then I also recommend timing how long it takes you to do certain things. So that way, when you have 30 minutes or when you have 4 hours, you know exactly what you can get done in that time, or about what you can get done in that time. And you don't have to spend the time saying, okay, well, what do I do? Or, do I do anything at all? Or like, what, it's just, there's so much more freedom. I also really like to use timers too.
That's a good idea.
So I like to use the Forest app, and it's an app on your phone and your browser. It's kind of like the Pomodoro method, but what it will do is it will lock you out of certain websites for that time. So I usually set it for like 25 minutes. And so that way I'm not tempted to like go and check my email a million times, or like go and go and check whatever. And that way it just has a set amount of time where I'm going to focus on that. And then I take like a 5-minute break where I'll let myself scroll through Instagram or something like that. But just not viewing it as 4 hours to do something.
Yeah.
Because when you say, all right, I've got 4 hours to do something, then it's one, an overwhelming amount of time. And two, it's just like so vague. It's just like, I don't know what to do during this time, when usually it's like planning and then covering literacy training or something like that, And so I think just you have to give yourself structure, because there isn't a bell system, there isn't carpool duty, there isn't a commute. Can be very helpful for teachers if they're feeling like, I don't know what to do, or I'm overwhelmed with what to do. Because it's definitely different. I also, last thing, recommend having an end of day ritual, because again, you're not going to lock your classroom door and get in your car. And so it's really easy to just be like, oh, I'm just going to work on this last thing. And then suddenly it's 9 o'clock and you didn't eat dinner and you didn't spend time with your family and you feel burned out because you just didn't stop. And so whatever it is, set an alarm 15 to 30 minutes before the end of your contract hours, and then set a timer for 15 to 30 minutes, and then do that last thing that you need to get done before tomorrow, and then shut your laptop. Even if you're going to come back to it, it's signaling to your brain, okay, I'm done for now. I'm going to take a break. If you need to come back to it, that's fine. But that way there is some sort of end to your day officially. Even if, you aren't rushing off to a meeting or carpool or closing your door or whatever it is, just creating these boundaries, but in a different way.
That's so good. I love that. Like you said, it is, teachers are used to having their schedule handed to them. And then, like you said, they develop routines around that. And so then I think it was just, wait, no, I have to set my own schedule and routine. And a lot of it was just not knowing how. And that's okay. But I feel like going back into the fall, if teachers still find themselves in that situation, they'll be a lot more used to, okay, I need to just figure this out. And it's just going to take time, but it's totally doable. I mean, you've proven that so much, and you have such great tips around that. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about virtual teaching. And so first of all, you talked about this a little bit, how long you've been virtual teaching, but I would love for you to tell everybody, how did you get into virtual teaching, and what was the learning curve like when you began?
Sure. So I actually applied to this position on a whim. I didn't really know a ton about it. This was the first music teacher position available at my school, so I'm the first one. And I really didn't know, but I really love to take on new challenges. And I thought that this sounded something, fun and exciting in music education. And I am a firm believer that every child deserves a high quality music education, no matter where they are or what school they attend. And so I've kind of become an advocate for that in the virtual space. And I think this has shown too that virtual music education is possible, because a lot of people, pre-COVID-19 would look at me and say, wait a second, you teach music online? How does that work? And so it was a lot of convincing people like it can be done. And now I think, even though this has been like a very terrible experience for so many people, I think it has also showed just the broader virtual world, at least, that music education can be done. And so now, thinking back to year one, I was so overwhelmed, like completely. It's basically like going back to your first year of teaching. And my school does a great job of acknowledging that. So every teacher, no matter how long they've been teaching, gets a mentor, because virtual teaching is so different. Yes, your core teaching skills can be transferable from place to place, but there are so many things that you need to learn in order to be an effective virtual teacher that it is important you have some sort of mentor. And I am part of the mentor team at my school. So my mentee this year actually has been teaching longer than I have, but they were year one virtual, and it is an adjustment. And so that is why I tried to help people as much as I could in the beginning, because I remembered how overwhelmed I felt. And I thought, oh my gosh, like all of these people are being thrown into this without the training that I got, because I had a whole week of training on virtual teaching before I even got into, my virtual classroom, and I had a virtual teaching mentor, and I had all these things in place, and I still struggled so much that first semester because it's just very new. And so if you are feeling like you are back at year one, that is a totally normal thing that we see happen in our school. And we have teachers that are absolutely brilliant, but still struggle in year one just because the modality has changed, and it really, truly is different. For sure.
Would you say that is the hardest part of virtual teaching, is just, like you said, transferring your knowledge from being in a brick and mortar school to virtual, and being like, wait a second, there's all this new technology. It's about learning new technology, which is a lot of what teachers are right now. They're like, which one do I use? And it's just, it's the stuff overwhelm, I guess you would say. I'm using air quotes. When I say stuff, I'm meaning like all the different platforms they could use or things like that. It just becomes overwhelming, I feel, not knowing what to choose, how to use it, if they're using it right. I feel like that might be the hardest part of it. Do you agree with that, or do you have other points to make about that too?
Yes, I think like the biggest thing that is important to keep in mind, but also one of the biggest challenges, is that anything can be done virtually, but not always in the way that you've always done it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you need to be creative, and that can be difficult if you've done something for so long, or if you are having to think about so many other things. It can be difficult to hold that space for like, okay, so how can I have a rehearsal with my band or choir when they're not even in the same physical location? It took me an entire semester to develop the model that I use in my school. And it was very good timing, because last spring was the first time that I tried the virtual ensemble model that I had developed. And it was good timing, because then I had been able to share it with so many people, but I had not even perfected it. I mean, this is only the third semester that I've done virtual rehearsals. So it's by no means like a perfected system, but the world could not wait for a perfected system. We just kind of had to do what we could with what we had. And so many people, developed so many great ideas and techniques too, that I am looking forward to implementing myself. But yeah, I think just the most difficult thing is just understanding it's not a one-to-one transfer, and that it requires a lot of creativity, especially when it comes to music, because a lot less attention has been paid to virtual music education.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. There's so much training for new teachers. There's so much training for music teachers in general. But when it comes to virtual teaching, did you find that was besides your school in general, like helping you out, was there anything else out there to help you with that a little bit, navigating that world?
Um, Truly not much. I mean, a lot of it, like I said, is at the college level, but teaching
Hmm.
college students is way different than teaching 815 music appreciation to high schoolers.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I connected with a handful of other teachers, but none of them were doing it quite in the way that I had been teaching or that
Mm.
I had been looking to teach. And so I definitely, connected with a couple people and collaborated a little bit, but not really to the degree that I was looking. And it would be frustrating too because, you know, I also looked at the research. So I'm a huge research nerd.
Hmm.
Um, and I looked at the research, and there's hardly anything about virtual music education at the K-12 level, which is hopefully something that I'll be able to do in the
Hmm.
future. That's my
Yeah.
eventual goal. But all of the research regarding virtual music is largely around Eric Whitacre's virtual choir, but not necessarily in a way that's applicable to the K-12 setting.
Hmm.
Um, Taking private lessons online, and then just like there's a lot more general virtual ed that's out there, but there's just this huge gaping hole, and I think that is part of the reason why there isn't a lot of virtual music education in a lot of virtual schools, because we've just been so far behind in
Yeah.
terms of like imagining what's possible. So being forced to imagine it, I think, will kind of bring more light and also trickle down to,
Hmm.
more students having access to music education. But
Yeah.
there is definitely this huge lack of research, even in comparison to art virtual education. So I know that research sometimes feels disconnected from practice, but it really does matter.
Hmm.
And that's what a lot of times policymakers or people higher up will kind of take a look at. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I didn't have a ton to go off of. So I'm grateful that I got to see so many other people's ideas, because it definitely helped me grow as a teacher, because I haven't had like a PLC where I could
Hmm.
interact with a ton of other virtual music teachers.
Yeah. I love what you said about you did connect with other virtual teachers, but you still wanted to do things your way. And I think that can apply for any teacher because the comparison game is strong. And I am constantly a big believer and constantly say this to be who you are. Yes, get ideas and have conversations and, see the way other people do things, but you don't have to do it the way they're doing because you bring your own musicianship and your personality to the table. And that I think is so cool that even though you were learning from these other music teachers, you were probably taking notes of, ooh, that's a good idea, or meh, that won't work for me. But still having the conversations is how you learn that. And so I think that's so, so awesome. And someone getting into virtual teaching, whether it's a virtual school or whether they're teaching at their brick and mortar school online, just still have the conversations and go into those Facebook groups that are providing all those awesome online, resources to help you teach online, but don't let it overwhelm you and try to do things the way everybody else is doing it, because that just gets stressful. I would say I want to hear your advice around this, obviously, but like pick something, start. If it doesn't work, go, that's not for me. I'm going to try this instead. But trying to do all of it is what's going to just not work. So with that said, give us any and all advice you have around virtual teaching. I just want you to tell us all the things because I know you have a lot to share and I just want to open the doors for you to tell me anything about that.
Yeah, so first I will say I always put a disclaimer at the beginning of my training saying, like, this is what I have found works for me. It may or may not work for you, and that's okay. And I've had some people actually message me and be like, it was really helpful to see your training because that is not going to work for me, but it was helpful to see something that is not going to work for me. So I know how to take a step in the direction of what will work for me. So yeah, and I would avoid anything that's like black or white thinking, like, you can do this or you can't do this. You can, I mean, I think don't let people tell you what you can and can't do. So I know there's like, it's hotly debated whether you can have like a virtual ensemble or not. And I will say I have found a way to do that where it's not taking up a ton of my time. I use Smart Music and I use GarageBand. And I have a video too on my YouTube page where I basically, I think in 45 minutes, I kind of explain, I walk you through my whole process. And so
awesome. I'll put that in the show notes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And so I would say that just stay away from anyone telling you like it's impossible or it's going to take a ton of time or it's not going to take a ton of time or like you can or can't do it. And just understand that there are many ways to do many things and you just kind of have to decide what you want. So for me, I wanted my students to have a community of music and I wanted them to be able to have some sort of performance at the end of the year. It did not need to be something that would go into Carnegie Hall. So the sound quality is not the best. And I don't do like a fancy video where you can see all my students playing, but you can hear them playing and singing. And even though it's not going to be the most high quality music recording, my students love being able to hear that they are doing something with other people, making music with other people. And that's really it at the end of the day. And so if you want a big fancy video, then yes, you may have to put in time or money, but you don't need a big fancy video to be able to give your students an experience and you don't of performing. And you may not even need to give your students an experience of performing at all. You know, it doesn't have to be black or white. It doesn't have to be this or that. It can be, music education can be many things. So with that said, getting off my soapbox a little bit and going into choosing one or two pieces of technology or tech tools and then sticking with them. Don't try to do it all. So my tech tools, I like Nearpod because it has so many different options that you can use in one. And then I use Smart Music. And this year I tried Soundtrap and I might continue with it. I might not, I'm not sure yet. But I added one of those at a time. So last year I started with Smart Music. This fall I introduced Nearpod. And then this spring I introduced Soundtrap. I did not try to do and learn all of these tech tools at once. So take it one step at a time and don't try to do it all. Just pick 3 and ignore the rest. Ignore it like it's your job. Because if you say, well, I like these 3, but I keep investigating these other things, then a lot of your time is just going to be spent kind of, you know, going in circles. So pick 2 or 3 and ignore the rest is my biggest thing.
I love that. I love that you said you tried one and you may or may not use it again, but that's the biggest, I think, piece of advice you gave around that is, but you just tried it. Because how are you going to know if you want to use something unless, even if you don't purchase it or use it, but if you look into it and you're like, man, that may not be for me or for not for me, that's coming out completely wrong. Let me try that again. I'm going to cut that out.
No problem.
That may or may not be for me. What you need to do instead of just looking at everyone's opinions about all the technology is whether you research it or whether you end up using it to try it out, do one of those, because that's the way that you're going to figure out if you want to do something, right? It's not just seeing someone post something in a Facebook group and going, oh, they like it, so I need to use that. And then you end up purchasing it and going, that's not what I need at all. Right? It's just like doing your own investigating and your own looking into it yourself is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love using Smart Music and I know some people do not, and that's totally fine, but definitely investigate for yourself. And I set it up in the beginning of the semester. Every semester I tell my students, I never teach a semester the same exact way twice, and I'm going to do some new things, and sometimes they're going to work and it's going to be awesome, and sometimes they're not going to work and I'm going to say, all right, we are probably not going to do this again. And when you set that expectation from the beginning, like there are going to be things sometimes this semester that aren't going to go well, it makes it a lot easier when you find something's not going well. You don't have to like stick with it because you have determined that you are going to use this during the semester, or you've told students this is going to be the thing that we do this semester. If you set the expectation that like, we're just going to try things together, and when they work, we're going to keep doing them, and when they don't work, we're going to stop, it makes it a lot easier for you to just stop and move on to the next thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a teacher listening to this who they maybe did some virtual teaching at the end of last school year, going into the new school year, or whenever they're listening to this, even if it's like the end of, the 2020-2021 school year, and they're saying, I'm just not cut out for this. This is not why I became a music teacher. I'm way too overwhelmed. What advice would you give that teacher?
I would say, first of all, it is natural to feel overwhelmed. I don't think that there's anyone that is not feeling overwhelmed. Honestly, I was also feeling overwhelmed when all of this hit, because even though my students continued on, they were still impacted by COVID-19 in ways that I knew of, in ways that I didn't know of, and it was still very overwhelming and draining. So it's not just about the music education that is overwhelming right now. Yeah. And I would also say that you need to pretend like you're at year one, even if you're in year 30, you are back at year one, and think back to your first year of teaching. You probably didn't do that much extra. You probably just kind of did the minimum, or maybe a little bit above the minimum, but you were basically just trying to get by. And your brain is no longer like that. You have added so many things. You've gotten so much better at multitasking and, so much more efficient at doing things. And you have these understandings and these activities that you could never have imagined your first year. But now you're back at year one, and you have to treat yourself like you are a first year teacher. And I am sure you would not tell a first year teacher, yes, you need to be this brilliant educator that knows everything and has all these brilliant activities for every single lesson, and students just love every single day. You would tell the first year teacher, you are going to make mistakes. It's going to be difficult at times. Take care of yourself. Don't do it all.
Yeah.
Your students will not remember day to day what happened. They're going to remember overall, did I feel good coming into this class? Did I feel safe coming into this class? Did I feel loved coming into this class? Did I feel like I had a great time making music? Am I going to continue to promote music and be a supporter of music even beyond the time that I spend in school? So don't lose track of the reason why you became a music teacher. And don't feel frustrated by things not being exactly like they were. Because even, if you do go back to the classroom, I mean, there are so many implications just mental health wise for what we're all going through right now that are overwhelming and are not even related to virtual learning, but feel like they're contributing to it. And so I think it's just important to just go back to your why and understand that it doesn't have to be the best music teaching you ever have done in your whole life for it to be making an impact on students and, making lifelong music learners. Yeah. So that's kind of what I would say to them.
Yeah. So you're saying to make it more about the students instead of worrying about if you're doing it all right and stressing out over that, because they don't know any different either. They just still want to see you showing up and trying. And just like you said, the main goal is to teach the kids music in whatever means that is. And
Yeah. I mean, students, my first year of teaching, and I look back on my first year of virtual teaching and I cringe a little bit. I mean, like I didn't even turn the chat on for like the first 3 months because I felt like I could not, I was really worried that it was just going to explode. But students, I take a survey every semester, and students still love my class, even in that like infant baby form where it wasn't very good that first semester, but students still learned. They still got something out of my class. They still felt welcome. They still felt seen. And at the end of the day, do I look back and cringe on that first semester of virtual music teaching? Oh yeah. But the thing is, like, those students still got value out of my class, and the students that are showing up to your class are still going to get value out of whatever you do, truly. So trust yourself, trust the music, don't worry about the technology, and make it about the kids, because they just need, they just need a space to feel okay. And you can provide that a lot of times, even more so than maybe some of the other subjects, especially if you see your kids, year after year in a lot of cases.
So good. Right, Michelle, I've loved this conversation so much. Before we go, do you have any other advice for elementary music teachers listening right now?
Yes. So even though I do teach middle and high school music, I do sometimes guest teach at the elementary level. And I will say this: you can still play singing games on Zoom. And so I actually did a sample lesson how I did that with Doggy Doggy. So that was I am definitely not an elementary music pro. I have so much respect for elementary music teachers. I love you all. But I did elementary music for my first year, and it was definitely not what I was cut out for. So, but I did remember Doggy Doggy being one of the favorites among my students. And so I did a sample lesson on how to play Doggy Doggy, and also use Nearpod to do some extension activities like creating rhythm patterns and having students potentially, say their rhythm patterns out loud and that kind of thing. So I will also give you the link for that if you want to put it in the show notes, but know that you can still do everything that you did in brick and mortar, but it just takes a little bit of creativity. And so don't feel like, you can't teach elementary music virtually, because it is just this totally overwhelming thing. You can do it. I will show you one way that I did it, and I'm sure you could come up with a million ways that you could do it better, because you all are the experts in elementary music. But yeah, I think that is the main thing, is that, don't feel like you have to cut out any of your favorite activities because you feel like they can't be adapted, because they totally can, just with a little creativity. And then one last little tip that I want to give is this. This is what saves me so much time in email. So there are two parts to this, and I just want to put it out there because email is kind of the bane of my existence sometimes. So one, keep a document with email templates, because you will often email the same things over and over again. So just so you don't have to use the brain power to come up with the wording. I even put the subject lines in so I can just copy and paste everything. And two, when kids ask you for help when they're having technology issues, don't try to go in and spend time figuring out what their issue may be. Ask them for a screenshot, because 50% of the time when they take a screenshot, somehow the issue is magically solved. So that way you don't have to spend time trying to figure out what to tell them or trying to figure out what they really mean. And I also have a link saved where if a kid's like, I don't know how to take a screenshot, I just send them the link, and there's an article that how to take a screenshot on every computer. But that will save you so much time in terms of having to be tech support for your class. So just ask for a screenshot, and it will make your life easier.
Yeah, such a good idea. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for those tips. So where can everybody listening right now, who I know are so excited about what you've shared, where can they connect with you online?
So my main jam is Instagram, as I know you spend a lot of time in that space too. So you can find me at _musical_rose. And you can also connect with me. You can send me an email, Michelle, MICHELLE, at themusicalrose.com. My turnaround time on email is a little bit slow right now, but I will get to you eventually. And then you can also visit my website, themusicalrose.com. So yeah, I love connecting with other teachers, though. Please reach out to me if you have questions. I try to answer them as soon as I can. And I'm happy to connect in any way with everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This conversation has been so amazing, and I know everybody listening in is going to get so much from it.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Thank you so much for listening in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, I would love for you to review the show and leave a rating on iTunes. To find out more about how I can help you gain momentum in your elementary music teaching career, head to thedomesticmusician.com, where you'll find free downloads, courses, the blog, and so much more. Continue teaching music and never doubt the impact you're making each and every day in the lives of your students.